so I grew up between upstate New York and Ohio, and then I graduated from high school. I went to Miami University. I met a boy. At the end of my sophomore year, became unsure of what I wanted to do. I followed that boy out to Colorado. I dropped out of school. I went out to Colorado.
We want to make sure that this boy was actually a man.
It was a man.
It was not a boy.
He was. He's 4 years older than me. So I moved to Colorado. We hung out. There's a ski bum. After about a year, I said, "Ooh, I have to go back to college. I don't feel right." So we ended up getting married. We came back to Ohio because he got a job with a division of General Motors in Warren, Packard Electric. He made a boatload of money, relatively speaking. I got to go to college. Then, a few months into that, I got pregnant. I missed the day in, gym class or whatever that you learned how that happened. So now I'm in college, and I'm at Youngstown State. And the interesting thing, I think, that tells people a lot about me, because this has happened now over and over throughout my life. So my first 2 years in college, my parents wanted me to go to school. My dad didn't even want me to have a job. He said, "Sweetie, I just want you to go to school, get good grades. Don't worry about it. I got this for you." Okay, good, Dad. I went. I could not bring myself to go to class. I could barely bring myself to, stop having fun, to register for classes sometimes. But I was smart enough that I managed to do okay. When I went back to school, and when I left college, my dad said to me, "Sweetie, I love you, but you have 3 sisters and brothers, and we're finished financially. Love you, but I got to figure out what I'm going to do with them." So when I came back and went to college, I was on my own, and I was paying for it myself. I never missed a day of class. It was incredible. And I was pregnant at the same time, and I would drive from Warren to Youngstown, which was about 45 or 50 minutes, and I was sick for about 6 months, and I would literally have to pull the car over and throw up on the side of the road, get back in the car, drive to class, go run in the bathroom, brush my teeth, then I have a baby, then I stay in school, and I finish. Anyway, I graduated at that point from Youngstown State with about a 4.0. So, that is the first time that happened. It happened over and over. Do not let me do things the easy way. I will fail. If you make me do them the hard way, I will succeed. And it's just a personality trait that has come out. So anyway, at the end of my undergraduate, I thought, what am I going to do? I have an accounting degree, which I got because it was the shortest distance out the door of Youngstown State. The credits all fell into place, and I could graduate. But I didn't. What am I going to do? So I had a friend who had gone to law school. So I thought, well, if he could do it, maybe I could do it. So I went and took the LSAT. And at the time, it cost $91 to take. We didn't have any money. I mean, we were kind of pretty broke, and I had a little baby. And so I go to take the test, and I get to the test, and it wasn't like it is today. There were no prep classes. They sent you a book that explained how they ask the questions and that they're tricky and that kind of thing. So I take the test, and at one point in the middle of the exam, I have put the answers to, say, Section 2 in Section 3, and I had to go back and erase them, put them over here, and it's a timed exam. And I walked out, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And I went home and told my husband, I just wasted 91 of our dollars. Please forgive me. Let's never speak of this again. So back then, you wait months to get your results. I go off. I'm up on the St. Lawrence River with my family. My husband's back in Ohio, and he calls and says, "Hey, your results came from your LSAT." And I said, "Oh, that's a bad memory. Throw them away. I'm so sorry. Don't bring it up." He goes, "I'm going to open them." He opened them, and I had scored in the 98th percentile on the test. Miracles happen. So, but in the interim, I had found out I was pregnant again. So, oh well, we're having another baby. And so this is like 1982. And so, okay, we're having another baby. So we have another baby, and then my husband gets a fellowship to go to the University of Chicago. So we moved to Hyde Park. And we're there for several years, raising our children, having a great life, living just a really international existence. The most, in my opinion, the best place in the world to raise a family. And then my husband has two job offers. One is to go to Wall Street, because this is the late 80s, you know, it's booming. I actually looked at an apartment that overlooked the UN. It was very me. And the other one was to go back to General Motors in Warren, Ohio. He opted to go there. And I said, what am I going to do there? He goes, I don't know, dust off that LSAT. Why don't you go to law school? Okay, good idea. So I apply. I don't know lawyers. I don't know what law school, you know, which one's better or anything. So Akron U was, at the time, only about $2,500 a year, and Case was close to $10,000 a year. I lived in Geauga County. We lived in Geauga County. It was equidistant. My husband said, well, you know, if you go with Akron U, the extra money, you could have an Amish girl be our housekeeper and watch the kids. Okay, I'm in for that. So I do that. Okay, go to Akron U. So I go to Akron U. I'm in the 5th week of my first year. I'm out in beautiful Amish country driving up 422 to go to a doctor's appointment on October 12th, 1986. And as I go through an intersection, I am T-boned by a woman going 55 miles an hour who kills the passenger in her car and breaks most, if not all, of the bones in my body. Not all, but many of the bones in my body. So now what? So I'm in the hospital for a week. They actually misdiagnosed me, and I end up having major surgery later, but I can't drive. I'm hurt. My arm is broken, crazy here. And my husband decides that, well, he'll help me. He's driving to drive me into Akron from Geauga County. I'll go to school, and then he'll go on to his job, and then he'll come back and get me, and then some friends help and that kind of thing. I go to see the dean of the law school at the time, and I say, look, here's the thing. There's this writing class, and my arm is broken, and I had it set with a pin as opposed to a cast, so I can kind of go like this, but I can't really write, and it was before we had a word processor or something, but it was before computers or anything that you could type on, and so the writing thing's going to be difficult. And the dean said, I'm sorry, the curriculum for the day students is that you take all of these classes, because I said, I can take this class in the summer with the night students. Oh no, you can't do that. So we think that you should withdraw. So I was probably 28 years old, I think I was 28 years old then, and I said, or 27, I said, no, I'm not going to withdraw. I mean, he's like, well, we're not going to make any exceptions for you. This is the day student curriculum, and you're going to do it. Well, once again, give me the hard road, and at the end of that semester, I was 5th in my class. Because do not tell me no, you know, and I will show you. So that was the start of that, and then in my second semester, over the break, I ultimately had surgery, and all the bones in my neck, it showed they were partially broken, and I ended up having surgery where they were all fused together. And I was in a brace from here to here. My husband said, I can't do this anymore. The driving every day, it's going to kill us. I can't do this. So I went to this university and said, what can I do? And they allowed me to rent a room in a freshman girls' dorm up the street a little bit from the law school. So I lived in a dormitory with freshman girls. I did have a room to myself. There was one payphone. It was on, you know, I look around and there are people in the room who are my age, and you remember that there was a payphone in the hall. You know, it rang incessantly, never for me. But I lived there, and I would go to class, and my husband would bring the kids in on Wednesday for visitation with mom, and then they'd pick me up on Friday night. And I did that for about several months. And so, so law school moved on, and I went through law school. In that period of time, though, for reasons that have to do with lots of things, including the fact that I had severe PTSD, and nobody knew what that was at the time, my husband and I separated. And there were other reasons, but that was one of the reasons, too. So we separated. He was now working in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So I'm in Geauga County. I need a job. I had originally thought I would go back to Chicago and practice law when I got out of law school, but I realized that to do that and to pay for, an apartment and all that, I would be working in a big law firm, 60, 80, 70 hours a week. I had 2 little kids. What am I going to do? So some folks at the law school start to send me out on some interviews. I will tell you, I see somebody here from the law firm. I actually had a summer internship at the end of between my second and third year in law school at a prestigious law firm in Akron. It was 1987, I guess, or so, I think, 88 in there. At the time, I was the only female legal professional with children of her own. There was a partner who had 3 stepchildren. There was a paralegal who had some stepchildren, I think, but they didn't really know what to do with me. And my idea at one point was that I would go to work really early. In fact, I moved to Akron and I rented an apartment. I sublet an apartment from a professor at the law school that summer so that I could be in town, available for work. And my idea was that I would go into work at 7:30 in the morning, and I would, kind of go home at 5:30 in the afternoon. Well, that wasn't the way it kind of worked. And so, you're supposed to be there late at night. And anyway, I didn't get an offer from that firm, and I am not really privy to all the reasons why, but I didn't. So then I'm still looking for a job. One of my most famous interviews was with the Court of Appeals in the 9th District. None of the judges are there, so I feel very comfortable, talking about it now. But I went to the interview, and they wanted to know, your resume says you live in Geauga County. You have to be a resident of Summit County to work here. Yes, I'm moving here. What do you mean you're moving here? Well, I've actually in the process of buying a house in Akron. Well, what does your husband think about that? I was like, what? I'm thinking, this is modern times. You can't ask me that question, but, I want you to give me a job. They then proceeded, including the female member of that court, to grill me about nothing about my education, the accomplishments I'd had. I was an inaugural member in a thing called the Inn of Court, which is kind of a fancy lawyer, group. None of that. All they wanted to know is, well, what do you mean? Where does your husband live? He lives in Sao Paulo. Are you getting divorced? Well, we don't have plans to right now. Well, because we don't want any divorces here. We had somebody who worked here before, and she got a divorce, and it was a bad thing, and we don't want... And I was just, well, who will watch your children? Why do you live in Geauga County? Well, because I have an Amish housekeeper who helps me with my children. We don't have Amish people here. It was... I almost wanted to just pack up and go away and never practice law a day, because I was the most disillusioned I've probably ever been in my entire life about anything. I spoke to someone who'd sent me on the interview. I was really fired up. I wanted to expose all this. And the person told me, listen, if you do that, you will never have a career in this city. So, you get a choice. And I swallowed it all down, and then I went to work. And then I had a private practice. I was in a 2-person law firm for most of my years. I only ever represented individuals. I never represented businesses. I represented individuals, either those people who've been charged with a crime or people who were injured primarily in catastrophic type of injuries, so medical malpractice, products liability cases where people were injured very severely. And I tried a lot of cases. When my youngest child was a senior in college, I decided that I was going to run for judge. That's when I met Jerry. And I decided in the years leading up to that, but I worked up towards it.
You didn't, just be clear, you didn't decide to run because you met me.
It wasn't.
Oh, okay.
No, but that sealed the deal. No. So but I was starting to think about it, and there were a couple of reasons, and one of the reasons was I'd spent at that point, whatever number of years it was, doing nothing but complaining about judges. And I thought, okay, I'm in a place in my life. For me, the reason I cared about making substantial amounts of money, which I was very I'm very grateful that I was able to do when I was in private practice. Things were different in the practice of law, and you could make a lot of money, do great work, and have a lot of fun. Were because I wanted my kids to go to college, and their dad and I, who have remained very close all these years. He never lets me forget about the drives from Geauga County to Akron. But we wanted our kids to go to school. We wanted them to have lots of opportunity. And so my youngest was a senior, and those days were kind of finished. And so I wanted a lifestyle change also. I lived on an airplane. I was always flying to take depositions or, do this or do that. And I just lived in airports, it seemed like. I never was there for anybody's birthday. I didn't feel that I had been a very good mom. I hadn't been a great daughter. I hadn't been a great sister, a good wife. I wasn't a really good friend. I was always working. And so I decided to run for judge. I spoke recently to a group of people at the League of Women Voters, and how did you get into politics? Well, I really got into politics because I wanted a specific job. And to get that job, you had to run for election. So I jumped in. I met Jerry. He was my advisor and campaign strategist. Through no fault of Jerry's, certainly at all. And I think no fault of my own, I didn't win that year. It was a presidential year. On this ballot, the Republican Party in Ohio had put a constitutional amendment banning marriage equality, and so it drove out conservative voters in droves. And if they did get to me, they voted against me and voted for the Republican judge who was holding the seat. The folks in the Democratic Party in Summit County took notice, though. I guess I did okay in the numbers. I worked hard and I made a good showing. So it had been extremely difficult for me to run for judge from my private practice because in the kind of practice I had, we eat what we killed, and if you're not hunting, you're not eating. And it cost my partner and I in lost income, plus savings that I had to spend of my own money to, pay the mortgage and the gas bill and all that, between the two of us, $152,000. In addition to that, my partner, who was both my law partner and my personal partner, my mate, and many of my colleagues and friends and supporters raised another $150,000 for me to fund the race. So it was a big, big hit, and I couldn't do it again and put my family, my partner through that again. So I was offered a job as the legal counsel for John Donofrio, who at the time was the Summit County Fiscal Officer. And that opening was available. I took the job. And then some mishaps occurred, about missteps. I was going to hopefully we had a Democratic governor for the first time in my legal career for a brief 4 years. The governor appoints when there is a judicial vacancy, but the appointment opportunities were given to some other people. Once again, I was disappointed. I didn't think things had worked out the way I was told they would or thought they should. But what happened even came around to be better, and that is in 2007, the state legislature added 2 judicial seats to the Common Pleas Court in Summit County. So I ran for one of those, which was a full term. I ran again. It was a presidential year, and this time I got to run on the coattails of President Obama, and we saw turnout in unprecedented numbers and from unprecedented parts of the community. Nothing is ever so moving to me as going to the polls and seeing people bring their grandchildren in strollers or, and just say this is black people saying this is a historic day. I want my kids and my grandchildren to be here. And so I was elected in 2008. It was great. I've loved my job. I absolutely love my job. So when it comes to 2014, 14, we have 6-year terms, and it's time for me to run again. I'm thinking, I kind of got this. I'm sure I'm going to have opposition because in Summit County judicial politics, there is no such thing as an unopposed race for reasons that go on and on. But I think, I've done well. I'm going to be all right. Oh, no. What happens is that in an unprecedented move, it's only ever happened one other time in the state of Ohio, and it happened in Summit County. The Republicans ran a sitting Court of Appeals judge against me. I'm a trial court judge. First of all, the Court of Appeals makes about 20 grand more a year than I do. Depending on your personality type and the things you like, it could be a much better job than mine. Mine's hard and slogging in the trenches and talking to heroin addicts and all kinds of people all day long. It gets very tough. It's a little more scholarly up there, and they have lots of time to think and study and research and write. Anyway, this woman ran against me. She had never lost an election since she started into the political world since 1996. She beat some of the brightest, most well-known, hardest working names in judicial politics in this county, and she was coming after me. And so, once again, I put on my "oh, don't tell me no" hat, and I worked my butt off, raised a boatload of money, spent a boatload of money, and I won again. So here we are. That was a year ago, November, and I am...
Okay, take a breath.
Okay. Well, you wanted it, and I gave it to you.
To quote a famous line, you had me at hello. Tell the class, what are the differences in terms of raising money for judge, what you can and can't do in a regular candidate? You as the judge, there is this, I don't know what you want to call it. There are rules, lots and lots of rules. And one of the rules is that you cannot actively engage in raising money yourself. You have to have people do it on your behalf. And you're really not supposed to know who's giving what, and you're not allowed to touch a check. There are limits on what people can give you, which is similar to other kinds of races. But there's this notion that you're not supposed to know anything, and yet you as the candidate, have to sign your financial reporting forms, which says you've reviewed them. So you see every person's contribution on there, the date, the dollar amount, etc. I think it's a legal fiction, but it's all in there. You also can't, I can't send out a letter, fundraising. The other thing I can't do is I can only raise money in the year in which I am running, which is different from any other candidate. You could most people have an annual golf outing or an annual pig roast or something. Keep yourself out there. We can't do that. We can only start raising money from a number of days before we file for re-election and for 120 days after the election. Is there an amount, a limit that they can give you?
There is. It's a $600 limit, at least I think it was last year for me. It was a $600 limit individually and a $3,600 limit on an organization, and in this case an organization is a law firm. So you can't take any corporate money, but law firms are incorporated. Again, it's another legal fiction. You can take up to $3,600 from an LLC or an unincorporated entity.
But from that entity, can you also take money from the lawyers?
You can. So in 2004 when I ran, and we were still in the best of times for lawyers in terms of lawyers being able to make money, there was a law firm, for example, that gave me whatever the corporate limit, which was lower, so say $3,000. Each of the lawyers then gave me $500,
And then each of their spouses also gave me $500. So from one law firm, and it wasn't a large law firm, I feel like it had about 14 lawyers or something, but I received a very, very substantial amount of contributions.
But even though, you can't ask for a check, and if you raised a boatload of money for your last race, you had to spend a boatload of time raising the money.
I
Right?
did.
So were there events that you went to where somebody, you were there and somebody spoke and they wrote checks and you never really technically asked for a check?
You have to have a campaign committee, and the campaign committee can raise the money for you. So the campaign committee holds socials at local watering holes generally. The lowest price, the better, if you can get out, because the campaign committee has to pay for the food and the beverage. That was one way that we did it, and then that committee sent out invitations. The people in the committee made phone calls, hey, come down, come, whatever. Other individual people had lovely events at their homes where there was a price for that, and I showed up sort of as, the guest of honor.
So when you talked about this last race of something unprecedented happening of someone from the higher court coming to run the lower court, I'm taking for granted she ran from cover.
She did.
That she was not up, so she was not losing her job, and so why were they so intent, meaning the Republicans, of beating you, that they would do something like that?
Well, I was the only Democratic incumbent on the ballot last year in the general division of the Common Pleas Court. So it was just me. Not all, but many of my Republican colleagues were also running for re-election, having been elected in 2008. So, so the focus was they were able to laser in. They only needed one candidate to run against me. There's also a position that was taken that this Court of Appeals judge will be 70 next year in 2016, and there is the law in Ohio that you cannot run for a judicial office and take office if you are 70 years old. So she will not be able to run again for her seat, which is up in 16. So that was the ostensible reason that she said she was running against me. But frankly, my opinion is, in order to take me out, they needed someone with judge in front of their name to do it. And they didn't really have anybody else.
Give us an idea of how much money was spent by you and your opponent in that race?
I spent another $150, and I think it's hard to tell because on the Republican side, the financials aren't as transparent as they are on, and I only speak for myself. So her financials show she actually raised no money at all. She used her own money, and she spent $91,000 of her own money running in that race. But the local Republican Party purchased television time, paid for the production of her TV time, and maybe other things too, which on my financials, when I get those kinds, I call those in-kind contributions, and I report all that. Let me just say this. She was on TV, on Cleveland TV, which cost, 2 boatloads of money. And there's nothing in her financial disclosures showing that she either paid for TV or paid for the production.
So 2014, as I remember, wasn't that long ago, was a bad year for Democrats.
Yes.
How do you win? How do you win that race?
I think I just went out and, I met every person I could possibly meet. Also, in the 5.5 years or so leading up to that, I probably had more jury trials than any judge for reasons that just sort of worked out in terms of my caseload. But in 2014 alone, by August, I had tried 17 jury trials, the shortest of which was too, we were in trial for 34, 35 straight weeks at one point. Many of them were very high profile. And so those are thousands of jurors who come in that room. I get to meet thousands of them every opportunity, every year. And I am very good to my jurors. I really, truly respect the work they do. And my goal is, I bought billboards last year so that over the 5.5 years of thousands of jurors I'd had, that they would be able to drive down the road, because they wouldn't remember my name just off the top of their head, but they could say, oh, that's her. And hopefully they had 2 or 3 other people in the car, and they could say, that's the judge, I was on jury duty and I really liked her.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but prospective jurors have to be registered to vote.
Correct.
Okay, so you're preaching
You're
to the choir.
preaching to the choir. I love jurors.
Okay, but before I open it up to class, and I'm going to ask first to have questions from people here who either know the judge or Dottie, who's the mother of a judge. But before we get to that, when you and I last saw each other, we had a conversation about capital punishment, and whether you're for capital punishment or against it. You pointed out in terms of the length of time somebody is actually sentenced to death, of what happens till that happens, and the amount of money is spent and all that. So give us an education on that from your viewpoint.
Several states, New Mexico is one of them. Governor Richardson eliminated capital punishment purely on a financial basis. The statistics show it's about $1 million. We spend about $1 million keeping someone, or not keeping them in prison, but for the representation costs, the lawyers, because appeals generally last out into the 20-year mark. And so the amounts of money being spent just didn't, New Mexico needed money for schools. It was more roads. It was more important. So there is a significant financial component that's spent. And once a person is convicted and sentenced to death in Ohio, their case goes to the Ohio Public Defender's Office. And the Public Defender's Office is very, very well funded at the state level, as well it should be, because the state is trying to take these people's lives, and so they are then afforded the utmost in procedural safeguards. So trial judges have to go, we call it death penalty school, but there's mandatory training for common pleas court judges who handle capital cases, where we, learn how to do it right and without making mistakes. There are 3 things that we all walk away with. The first one is, and it's language that comes from United States Supreme Court cases. Death is different. There must be super due process, even though there is no such thing, no such animal, but super due, that means always err on the side of due process for the defendant. And the third one is the record, meaning the court reporter, what the court reporter writes, and the filings is your friend, and the record. So, but they are long and complicated cases, and they are fraught with the potential for error. And I don't know, but I think in that same conversation, one of the things we talked about too was perhaps the human cost. And the human cost that I see is, and it was just brought home to me in the last couple of months. A federal judge in Toledo overturned a death penalty case where a man shot and killed a police officer in Cleveland. In the trial, it was 15 years ago. In the trial, in the jury selection, the trial judge made a mistake in this federal judge's eyes about whether a black juror should have been permitted to remain on the jury. The trial judge allowed that black juror to be dismissed. And there's a case called Batson versus Kentucky that says that defendants are entitled, paraphrase, defendants are entitled to a jury that looks like their community, is kind of how I would say it. And so this this black juror had been erroneously, in the eyes of the Court of Appeals, Federal Court of Appeals judge, no, not the Court of Appeals, the federal trial court judge, had been erroneously removed. He ordered the trial, this judge reversed the verdict and sent it back for retrial. So if you stop and think, and it came home to me because my current husband is the son of a deceased now, but Cleveland police sergeant. And I said to him, you know, could you imagine, you know, your dad goes off to work, he's killed on the job. And I think that based on what I've read about the case, there's no question the guy murdered the police officer. That's not the issue. It's about the penalty phase, because the jury in a death penalty case decides the penalty. I said, you know, say your 15-year-old kid, dad goes off to work, he's murdered, your mom, you know, what a tragic thing, you got to struggle, it's awful, it's horrible. They catch the guy, they try him, takes a year, maybe a year and something, that's just an awful time for you as a family, it's horrible. And there's a conviction, and he's given the, you know, death penalty. And now, fast forward 13, 14 years, you're a young 30-something person, maybe you're just married and you're about to have a baby. Maybe your mom's remarried. Maybe life is, your grief is somewhat is in the past and we are very happy. And you get the letter, oh wait, here we are, back again, in what I would consider the bowels, you know, some level of Dante's hell. And we're doing this all over again. And so what we see in these death penalty cases is there is the level of review goes on and on and on, as I believe it should. And then a judge somewhere very far removed looks back and says, oh, there was a mistake.
But the thing that people have to understand is that when someone is sentenced to death, what's the average time that someone would actually be put to death if that even happens?
Well, as long as they don't turn themselves into a volunteer, which a guy down in Corpus Christi, Texas just did, and waive all of his appeals, Texas runs things a little shorter than some other places, but it can be anywhere from maybe 12 or 14 years up into the 20s. Ohio, for example, I saw today, just put a moratorium on imposition of the death penalty until 2017 because they can't get the drugs that they need for the lethal injection.
So before I turn it over to the class, let me just make sure that I and everybody else understands procedure here. Someone goes on trial and is convicted, say it's murder. The jury then decides whether they want the death penalty.
Well, it can only be in specific kinds of murder with specifications, is what they're called, that are outlined in the law. Killing 2 or more people in the commission of an aggravated robbery or aggravated burglary,
let's just
etc.
say that.
And they are convicted of that.
Okay.
In a death penalty case, there is a second phase of the trial. And in the second phase, and it is the only in a capital case, and it can only be for these aggravated murders, there are no other crimes that are eligible for the death penalty in Ohio. There is a second phase, and it's called the penalty phase or the mitigation phase. And really what the gist of that is that the defense puts on a case telling the jurors, giving the jurors mitigating factors or mitigating circumstances about the defendant, how he was raised, things that happened to him. It could be almost anything that then are weighed against the aggravating factors, which are these specifications, 2 or more people, you know, police officer in the line of duty, etc., versus the mitigating. And then the jurors have to go in the back and deliberate and balance those. And if the mitigating outweigh the aggravating, then they must vote for one of the possible life sentences. And it can be life without parole, life with parole after, you know, specific numbers.
Okay, so, but when it gets to the judge, the judge cannot sentence somebody to die without that jury recommending.
That's correct. But
If the jury does recommend, the judge doesn't have to
That's correct.
sentence it to die.
That's correct. And when, what happens is when you get a death recommendation back from the jury, you then, as a judge, must sit down and painstakingly review every iota of evidence in the mitigation penalty phase and do your own independent weighing of aggravating versus mitigating factors and come to your own conclusion. Another judge, colleague of mine who's in the middle of a death penalty case right now, and I were just talking about this the other day, and from our death penalty school, our training that we attend, we have been advised that there is only one judge in the state of Ohio, we believe, or they've told us, who went against the jury verdict or the jury's recommendation of death. And he spoke to my class. I don't know if he spoke to hers, but when he spoke to my class, two things. The first thing he told us is that the year in which he did that, he was not going to run for re-election. I think he was probably close to 70, and he wasn't going to be able to run for re-election. And so he was sort of freed from the from the confines of, having an opponent who could use that against him. And the second thing that he told us is that if you do that, you need to be prepared to lay down your career. And it was one of those are about the most powerful words I've had spoken to me in any of the training I've ever had.
So is that worse than giving someone let's say, 5 to 10 year sentence, you give them 5, found them 5, and they commit another crime? Is that worse than what you just described in terms of electability?
Well, you always have the Willie Horton factor, the thought that somebody who's out on parole or, that you didn't send to prison did some heinous thing. And, so that I think those are realities I live with and most judges live with every day, is you're trying to, fashion the best sentence you can. I think that whether it's worse, I don't know, because there's no, we don't, in Ohio at least, we don't really seem to have any experience with it.
Okay. Judge, you get to ask the first question. Judge to judge. Hit your button.
What do you like best about the job?
What I like best is that I get to meet more people than I could ever have imagined I could meet and have some impact on things that are going on in their lives. And so did you get it? I like people, I like to interact with people, and I like that part of it the best. As a lawyer, I always, like I said, represented individuals, but you can only represent so many individuals even in one career. I just get to meet tons of people. I love, I don't know. I love to go to work, though.
George, you get the second question. Okay,
Don't ask me something that's like serious about subrogation or something like that.
No, the question I would ask, and I've seen you on the campaign trail, and really, it's she gets out there and she'll put in the signs, and she'll give the speeches, and she'll pet the dogs, and so forth, and she's very sincere. Which is, as you can see, she's very sincere. So when you talk to her, for a short period of time, you realize that person you're putting into an office is, is a real person who understands people and has empathy and can also pull the trigger. So I think that basically that's what I see.
that's not a question, George. That's an endorsement.
Well done, Judge. Well done.
I don't have any questions for her.
Okay. Myron.
I'm going to like to go back to the death penalty. You said, okay, you have, he's guilty, and then you're saying, well, it can be, and then you give him the death penalty, and it can be protracted to 15, 20 years. You know, I have a problem with that. I don't understand. Is the problem with the death penalty? Is the problem with our system? Is the protraction of our system 15 years because the lawyers like to milk the system so they get, you know?
I would say that's not the case at all. You know, and I have really strong limits on what I can say about how I feel about certain things. And, you know, one thing I will tell you is that I raised my hand to God and I swore, I took an oath to uphold the laws of the state of Ohio and the Constitution, and we have a death penalty in Ohio. And I knew when I took that oath that that was a law that I was swearing to uphold. And I believe that with all my being. Having said that, so I don't want to leave anyone with any, please don't speculate on what you think my opinions are. But I think that when we are going to, you know, extract and take the ultimate penalty from someone as a society and as a country, as a nation, and as they are entitled to challenge that to the fullest extent, so that when it is carried out with a certainty that we can all rely on. And one of the things that has come out over the last 10 years is the Innocence Project. And the Innocence Project has freed now hundreds and hundreds of people, many of whom are on death row, through DNA, primarily through DNA. Interestingly, a significant portion of those people who have been freed by the Innocence Project confess to the crime. That is a very important statistic to keep in mind. Why would someone confess to a crime they didn't commit? We don't have all night. I could give you thousands of reasons because every case is different. So if we are going to exact that punishment, I think that they are entitled. And what happens is that, so for example, over the changing course of my career, we no longer can execute the mentally retarded. That's been a change in my career. So now we have lawyers who are posing challenges at the appellate level that their client is intellectually disabled and mentally retarded, have the same, you know, meaning, but they're now intellectually disabled, so they cannot be put to death. We didn't have that process 25 years ago, or even, I don't know, maybe, I think the Supreme Court decision was in 2004, but we just had our first judge in Summit County find a defendant intellectually disabled so that he could not be put to death in a case in which he was charged with the death penalty. So things are evolving. Also, it takes years to compile sometimes the evidence or find witnesses or that may be impactful on those appellate levels. So there are so many reasons why it takes a very long time. Lawyers milking the system is absolutely not one of them. Absolutely not. And it's not because I'm a lawyer, because I will tell you bad things about lawyers sometimes too. But.
Joe?
There's been different kinds of talk about the way judges are selected. Should they be elected, appointed? Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. I like getting elected. I actually do. And I know that I'm in the minority about that, and I've had hellish races. All three of my races have been, you know, total uphill slogs. But I think that by us having to be elected, it forces us out into the community to meet with the public, most of whom don't know anything about judges, think they are never going to need a judge. You know, that's my campaign speech. You know, everybody hates lawyers, right? Until they need one, and then they want the best. And as a result, nobody really likes judges because they don't ever think they're going to need one. But, you know, the kinds of cases that I see, one of my longest cases, took forever, were two neighbors who lived in Firestone Park in Akron who had a beef with one another, you know, and they were both folks who clipped their yards with nail clippers, and they were just beautiful lawns, and they couldn't get along and caused damage and all kinds of things. You know, you never know. People can sue anybody for anything, and you never know what it is that's going to cause you to be in need. You'll be leaving here tonight, God forbid, sitting at a traffic light, and bam, some guy, you know, rear ends you, and you're in a situation. So I think it's helpful for the community to know who their judges are. And if we didn't have to run for re-election, it forces us every 6 years to get out there and talk to people and do what George said, which, you know, you said it nicely, but I was out the door at 7 every morning and home at 10:30. I know where every pancake breakfast is. I know where every Rotary meeting, you know, and you got to do that circuit all day, every day.
Do you think the capital punishment will be abolished in Ohio anytime soon, or do you think that's...
I think that it is more likely than not that we will not have capital punishment in the foreseeable future. The Chief Justice has put together a task force on it, full of all kinds of people. They've made a lot of recommendations about it. Even Justice Scalia in the United States Supreme Court recently spoke in New Hampshire, which never really made it on the radar too much, in which he said he doesn't think that the death penalty will, that would be obviously a federal law, and then, you know, it would abolish it in all the states. But he didn't say he favors abolishing it. He said he believes it will be. And so we now see this moratorium through 2017 because they can't get the drugs to carry it out appropriately. And we are seeing more, and the Supreme Court just reversed a case from Youngstown on a death penalty. It takes the first appeal you get in a death penalty case is to the Ohio Supreme Court. You skip the 9th District Court of Appeals in death penalty cases, so it takes about 5 years for the case to get there. And the Supreme Court just reversed a death penalty case and sent it back to Youngstown, to Mahoning County. So we're seeing reversals, and that will be obviously something that is way above my pay grade. But I never thought we'd have marriage equality in this state, and it happened like that. I never thought we'd be talking about legalizing marijuana. I think when and if the snowball gets rolling, it's possible that we will see it sooner rather than later.
I'm kind of curious, with all of the unrest that's taken place over the last year, sort of Ferguson, Baltimore, and the mistrust of minority communities towards law enforcement, what role can judges play to sort of to assuage that, or to at least to address that and, you know, bring perception back of you know, equal footing for minorities and whites in the judicial system?
To not be scared to talk about it, to acknowledge it, to say, I understand, to create that dialogue. So, for example, in jury selection on a criminal case, it's been very interesting, the kinds of talk that we get. We get people in the panel saying, well, I think we should have, the black community should have more personal responsibility and community responsibility for how, you know, members of their community behave and interact with police and things like that. And then you have other people saying, you know, I think that, you know, people are targeted, people of color are targeted. Getting that conversation out there and allowing it to go on does important things. It allows the lawyers, both the prosecutor and the defense lawyer, to understand how these jurors think. Because what we want are 12 jurors who are as fair and unbiased as they possibly can be. And so that's one way. I had a death penalty case. I had 2 of them last year. And one, and in the case, we had 4 young black people who were murdered, execution style, in a basement. We also had black defendants, though. And so the victim's family, you know, they're very distraught. There's 4 families. They want to, you know, they're emotional. And so over and over and over, I would talk to them and say, look, you can't act this way. You can't shout out, or you can't wear T-shirts that are emblazoned with, rest in peace, because we are going to do nothing that can influence this jury one way or another, because this is about fairness for everyone here. Fairness for the defendant, fairness for your loved one. So I think we can do a lot, but it's hard work and it's uncomfortable for people that aren't, that don't like to talk about race, or would rather just believe we're in some sort of post-racial society.
Returning to judicial elections for a second, do you like running in nonpartisan elections?
No.
Okay, and why not?
I think that one's political party says something about one. And, people always ask me, what's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican? And for me, I think the difference is, how does one see the role of government? Democrats tend to see the role of government as larger, and Republicans tend to see it as narrower. So how does that work with me as a judge? Well, I think that there is a role for government to play in helping our community assist with people who are convicted of crimes, who are suffering from addiction, who haven't gotten an education, who are buried under generational poverty. I think that there is a role for government in that, and that it is I want a partner, and I like government as a partner in that. I think that that's one way. I don't understand why, I really don't understand why we can't express our partisanship, although thanks to one of our Supreme Court justices, O'Neill, he actually trailblazed a path for us to be more free to declare ourselves as a Democrat or a Republican. So when I first started running in '04, I don't even know that I could say anything at all about what I was or who I was. The county Democratic Party would endorse me. Is that how it was, Claire? We had to do it that way. And now I can actually put it on my signs that I'm a Democrat. I don't think I did it. Did I?
I don't know what you did, but in Summit County, I certainly did.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't do it in Wayne County.
Oh, right, you ran in multiple counties. No, I think I had stickers or something. I can't remember. Oh, yeah, you know what I did? I actually did that. I had stickers, big yellow stickers that said Democrat, that went on my, 4x4 yard signs in parts of Summit County. I did not put them in the north, which is very heavily
Let me get
Republican.
back to Alex's question. How many judges are there that serve like you do on the Common Pleas Court in Summit County?
There are 10 of us in the general division.
Okay, and how many Democrats and Republicans?
There are 3 Democrats and 7 Republicans.
Okay, so based upon what you just said about a Democrat...
Why are you waving?
Well, I want him to ask the next question that he may not know he should ask. How many of them are men?
4.
4 Republicans or 4 total?
4 total. McKinney, Parker.
I forgot about the kid.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, so we established that most of them are women.
We are.
Okay, so back to Alex's question, if you have 4 Democrats and 6 Republicans, based upon your philosophy of Democrats having a wider view, Republicans a narrower view, do you see your colleagues on your side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle basically adjudicating based upon that philosophy?
No, not necessarily. I don't.
Okay.
I really don't.
So you think that they put their politics aside, their party aside?
I didn't say that. I said that all of us, I think all of us, I say for the most part, particularly in our criminal cases, are stymied with the afflictions of the people who come before us, and they are varied. Currently, we are literally in a heroin epidemic, and people are dying at the rate of 1 or 2 a day. So we are all willing and welcoming any help we can get. So when I talk about politics, I talk about big up here things. You know, what should be the role of government in our society? Should we have socialized medicine? What should be our foreign? That's politics to me. I think that what goes on in our county is got nothing to do with politics. It has to do with power. The power of people to be able to give jobs to other people who, you know, help them and that kind of thing. We don't do politics.
Okay. Dottie?
I was going to mention, and you're talking about the role, whether government should be involved or less involved. How many of the alternative courts have been instigated by Republican judges?
All the alternative courts have been started by Democratic judges. And when Dottie talks about alternatives, she's talking about, I call them therapeutic courts. We have a mental health court in Akron Municipal Court, and I think now they have mental health courts in some of the other communities. We have drug courts. We have a family violence court at both the city level and the county level. I have a reentry court, which is, I have a large group of folks who I've allowed to come back from prison early. They are under strict supervision to me for about a year. And I say it as plainly and simply as this: we try to fix what's wrong with them so that they can become very productive parts of our community. As a judge, I have 2 roles when it comes to sentencing. The first one is to punish the offender, and the second one is to protect the community. Well, while the offender's locked up for 2 years, because those are the sentences most people get on things, we're safe. He's not going to break in our houses or, do anything. But in 2 years and a half, when he's out on the streets and back with his buddies and, doing drugs again and doing all that, now we're all in danger. So I take my role of protecting the community very, very, very seriously, in the sense that if I can fix what's wrong with you, I feel we can be protected from your bad behavior going forward, maybe in perpetuity. So we have been, and I think that fits with our with a real political philosophy, which is how can we rehabilitate people. Someone I really respect and like says that, there's a faction in this country who believes that that people should be able to raise themselves up by their bootstraps. Okay? I was raised in a house where my dad believes that way. Well, every single day, I am spending time with people who don't have boots. And that is the absolute fact of it. If they had some boots, they might find the bootstraps, but they don't have any, they don't have shoes. And so we have this very broad and rather deep segment of the population in Summit County that couldn't be more different than we are. And so I think that traditionally, my dad is a very staunch Republican, Mr. Coast Guard Academy, and I love him madly, and he's super smart, and all that. But he was a bootstraps guy, and then when I became a judge, he used to start to come and hang out in my court and see what was going on. And my dad would be brought to tears by some of these people. And these guys were drug dealers, and he'd still be brought to tears by them. So, we just don't have the different parts of the population together.
Okay, let me just turn a second to the fact that as a judge, you are sentencing people to prison. How many prisons have you visited?
Oh, I visited a lot because I was a criminal defense lawyer, not because I'm a judge.
Okay. So have all your colleagues basically, for whatever reasons, visited prisons?
None of my colleagues, I think, have ever visited a prison.
Okay. So when you sentence somebody, you're sentencing them to, I think it's called the Ohio
Department of
Rehabilitation and Corrections, right? That's what it's called. Any rehabilitation going on in these
There
places?
isn't any. When I was first practicing law, in prison, you used to be able to get a college education. You used to be able to have meaningful work. There were a lot of perks, how they could be called. The current director of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, who's no lefty, liberal, soft on crime guy, has told me in conversations that we've had, he would go back to those days in a heartbeat. He could run a prison with a mean look out of his eye. When I first started practicing law, we had indeterminate sentences. You could get 3 to 8, or 5 to 10, or 2 to 25. I mean, and what that meant was that first number was when you could go to the parole board. And then you get to the parole board, and the parole board would decide whether your crime and your behavior in prison supported you being released from prison earlier than the last number. In July 1st of 1996, we went to truth in sentencing, which means if you get 4 years, you do every day of 4 years, and there's nothing you can do that you can get out early, and there's nothing you can do that will keep you there longer. And Director Moore, that's his name, says that was the day that things went south, because for people who work in corrections, meaning guys who are, the people, men and women who are working inside those institutions. So he said, I used to be able to walk into the yard of the penitentiary if there was a fight, and I would immediately know who were the good bad guys and who were the bad guys. Because the good bad guys were not going to do anything. You held this carrot, which was privileges, going to the gym, going to class, going to work, whatever it might be, out there, and you could take it away from them. So they tended to behave. You also held this parole board. Well, after July 1st of 1996, when you got 4 years, you did, and so Moore said to me one time, now a guy can come up to me and he can tell me vile, horrible things about my mother, and I could put him in the hole, which is a couple of weeks maybe, but I cannot affect the thing that matters most in life to him, and that is the day he gets out. And so, yes, there is the other thing is the prisons are way overcrowded, way under, there's no money, and there's not room there's an AA meeting here and there.
How many of these prisons are built in a urban area?
Oh, but almost none. They're mostly in very poor, very rural areas where they are sources of employment for the people. And one of the things about prisons, from the prisons I've visited, is that it's kind of hard to distinguish between the people working in the prison and the people incarcerated in the prison, except that the people working in the prison go home to their very meager, modest, trailers or small homes, and they go home at the end of their shift. And the guys people are locked up don't obviously go home, but they don't really seem all that different.
This is 2015. You just got elected in 14, so you have a 6-year term. You're up in 20.
Yes.
So we have 16 and 18 between now and 20. Any thoughts about running for something from cover in terms of a higher court?
No, I don't think so. I have an opportunity next year that I could run for the Court of Appeals. In 2016, there will be two open seats. And I think we've made a family decision that I'm going to enjoy my work now. The other thing is, I'm not the kind of judge, I'm not the kind of person who would enjoy the work at the Court of Appeals. It is lonely. One of the things about our courthouse is literally, you could just walk in and walk right in my office and be like, hey, hi, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. My bailiff, if she's at her desk, would say, excuse me, and she's a rather imposing woman, but mostly you could just walk in. I love it. It's great. It's lots of people interaction. In the Court of Appeals, you don't even have to go to work. You can just work from home about, maybe 90% of the time?
Why?
Not you. Many of our people do
Why is there a age limit on when somebody can run for judge, but there's not an age limit for any other position?
I don't know. I think that it is an outdated idea. I don't know. I'm 57, so I only have 13 more years, too, so I can't be out there forever. That's another thing. I'm not particularly marketable in another court. Like, to have ambition to keep going, to run for the Supreme Court, I couldn't run over and over again and have a lengthy career there. But I don't know. I think it's an outdated vision of what people were like at 70. And, I have this funny running gag with the prosecutors who work in my court. Okay, in Ohio, we have a statute that if you are over 60 or 65, I refuse to read it because I just don't want to go there. In someone steals from you, the crime is enhanced because it is theft from the elderly. And I always tell them, please, I don't want my house to be broken into or anything, but if I am the victim of some sort of theft, if you charge the people with that crime, I will kill you. Because, whatever age I am, whatever age it is, I am not going to be elderly. I don't know about anybody else. So.
Kayla, do you have a question for the judge?
Yes, I do. Judge Rowlands, one of your most recent decisions had to do with the Nexus pipeline, and I was very much interested in what sort of factors or considerations went into your decision, especially since 9 other county judges had ruled in favor of the pipeline organization while you ruled in favor of the people. And so, especially even as close as Stark County, their judge ruled against the people and you did the opposite. So I kind of just want to know where your thought process was with that decision.
Well, I actually did talk. Judge Heath called me right after my decision was published, and we talked about it. And your characterization isn't one that I would necessarily agree with. The proceeding that was in my court, and because it's a pending case, I can't talk about anything more than what I've already written and about the procedure that led us there. So that's it. Like, I can't talk about maybe what will happen next. What I decided, we had before us a motion for a temporary restraining order that was filed by the pipeline company in a reverse of what is normally a temporary restraining order. Normally a temporary restraining order would be, say, a property owner saying, keep them off my land. This was the pipeline company saying, we need you to restrain the homeowners from preventing us from coming on the land. And so it was kind of wonky in the syntax of it, I guess is maybe how I would say it. So anyway, there are 4 prongs to get a temporary restraining order. The first prong is that you must prove that you are likely to prevail on the merits of the case. That's the first one. And then there are 3 others about weighing harm, etc. But the first prong is that you are likely to prevail on the merits. The statutes at issue are under 163, and we'll just talk about 163. Under 163, the pipeline company puts forth that they are entitled by virtue of their status as I would call it maybe a quasi-utility, to be able to go on your property to do this survey. Well, I have a very brilliant magistrate, Martha Hom, who works with me, and so the first line of 163.01 says, pursuant to the notice set forth in this statute, a company may do X and Y. Well, Martha and I actually looked at the notice, and at 163.04, it tells you what the notice must contain. And at 164.041 is a sample form of the notice that must be used. And the law says that the notice given to the property owners must substantially comply with 163.04 and 041. Well, the notice that was given in this case was just a really friendly letter from the pipeline company to the homeowners saying, or property owners saying, hi, we're coming into your neighborhood, we would like to do some surveying, etc. It did not, in my opinion, substantially comply with the notice that was set forth in the statute. And so having found that there was and my order says that there was a failure of the condition precedent, meaning you have to have certain conditions before you can even go to the next step, I found that they were unlikely to prevail on the merits. And so they didn't meet the first prong, and therefore they were not able to get a temporary restraining order. So then I set it for a full hearing, which was supposed to begin on Monday, and then the parties have asked to file for summary judgment, which is just a lot of briefing, and we may have a hearing and things like that, that will be where we decide basically just the issues of law.
To anyone that's looking to go to law school or pursue a career in law, what advice or what guidance would you give to somebody?
Be able to write well. And every lawyer, no matter what he or she does in their career, attempts to persuade someone. So if you're working at a bank and you are writing to another banker and you're working on a contract, you're trying to persuade someone. Being able to write well is the number one skill, I think. The rest of it kind of just comes with a certain level of intelligence and interest in the subject matter. But when you can write well, I think that sets you apart from lots of people.
It's, in my day, a long time ago, when I considered this, I had to take the LSATs. Is there any way to get around the LSATs?
I don't think so.
That's why I never took them.
Yeah, I don't think so. In fact, there were times in the not too distant parts or past and in other parts of the country that you didn't even have to go to law school to be a lawyer, or you could just go and sit for the bar exam, I think, or but it's all regulated now. We don't let any.
So I'll preface this by saying I don't know what the data looks like offhand. But is rehabilitation possible? What do our recidivism rates look like? How many of these guys, and feel free to talk specifically about your program, are headed back in eventually?
Well, it depends what the kinds of programming are provided to them. I listened on Friday last week to a municipal judge from Columbus who runs a program for prostitutes. He says, yep, I'm the guy with the hooker court, right? And he said, I used to be the guy, he was a prosecutor, prostitution is a victimless crime. These girls are in it, but this is what they do. Maybe we should legalize it, get them good health care, all these things. Well, he has come to the realization that in Ohio, and his number was 92% of the women arrested for prostitution are victims of human trafficking. Now, I think of human trafficking as, we bring people over in container ships from other countries. No. Human trafficking, the statute on human trafficking was enacted in 2012 in Ohio, and prostitution is engaging in sexual activity for money. Human trafficking is coercing another to engage in sexual activity for money. And this judge said that what was the light bulb for him was in 2008, he was presiding over domestic violence cases, and he was in court, and there was a group of women on one side of the room and a group of women on the other side of the room, and he asked his prosecutor, what are those women over there? And he said, oh, those are the victims of the domestic violence who are here to testify today. He goes, well, what are those women over there? Oh, those are the prostitutes. He goes, they looked identical. And the reason is because they are identical. He runs a program for women who are charged with prostitution called the Catch Court. And in his program, 74%, it's a 6-year data now, 74% of the women who have entered his program, not even graduated, have not been rearrested for a crime. In my program, we have some We have some data, although our data isn't as, it's more anecdotal because the Supreme Court just certified us in the last few years. So we don't have what I would call good data. Anecdotally, I save people all the time, meaning they come back 2 years later and they bring their kids, or they bring their husband, or they call and ask, can you marry us? Or, and they show me their accomplishments. What percentage of that are the people I actually deal with? I don't know. And when I say I save them, the role I play is I gave them a chance. There are teams of people who, I think we're good, we're best when we provide wraparound services. So if you don't have daycare, you can't go to work. If you don't have health care, maybe you can't go to work. All these things that we want them to do, we got to work with that. And it's exhausting.
Last question, Dr. Green.
Judge, as you know, there's a pattern in judicial elections. Sometimes it's called roll-off, sometimes it's called drop-off, which is that among people who cast a ballot, relatively few people vote for judge. And as I'm sure you know, the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court has proposed some remedies to that. And one of those remedies is to have judicial elections in off-off election years where there just be judges. And therefore, in her opinion, this would attract more attention, more people would vote, and so forth. What do you think about the general issue of drop-off, and what do you think of the Chief Justice's proposals?
For every 100 people who voted for President Obama, only 55 voted for me. And I still won. Drop-off is an enormous problem. And I spent $150,000 every one of these years, and yet 45% of Democrats didn't vote for me. How do I must have put 5 pieces of mail in every one of your mailboxes if you live in this county. So what don't you know about me? I have a website, I have a Facebook page, I have, I'm out everywhere. So I don't get it. I don't agree. I understand where the chief is coming from on the off-year elections, but I think it goes into what I heard you saying at the very beginning of this class, which is in off-year elections, or, there just isn't, people aren't going out. And you couple that with my experience, which is the vast majority of voters don't think that they need to care who their judges are. So I don't know that it's going to motivate them to go out, because the people who care who their judges are, or recognize maybe their civic duty to learn who their judges are and get out there and vote, they're already doing that, albeit in lower numbers, I understand. But I just don't think that it is going to...
Here's the issue to me, and you ran in a presidential year. So this is not about getting turnout, right? It's not about these people actually came to vote. Right? They're there, they're voting. And they're voting for, president, and they're voting for governor, or whatever it is. And then they don't vote for, it's not like they vote for somebody else. They didn't vote at all.
Nope.
So, and that's not something that just happened last year or 2 years ago. This happened forever. So it seems to me that you may not, totally agree with what she's trying to do, but she's trying to do something. And I think this, if in my opinion, what needs to be done is you take judicial elections and you put them at a time like June or May, okay? And there's nothing else going on. And you do a PR program about how important judges are, like you do for everything else. And the only thing you get 100% turnout. I mean, 100%, there's no fall off.
There's no fall off.
There's no fall off. That's the point. That if you don't have anybody else voting for any other position, you get 100% no fall off.
Mm-hmm. And that is true. And the people, it is turning it into sort of what you're calling like a special election. Now, sometimes people do it for a levy or something that might come up. I mean, fall off is a problem. And we spend tons of money and tons of time trying to minimize it. And so I just have not seen any, I when the chief is out talking, I haven't heard her speak about other places where this has been implemented and what the results are. I would be curious, I am curious about it because I'm all for changing it to effectuate more. But isn't it still the same? So you get, 80 million people that vote up here, and then you get the people who actually care down here.
Yeah, but my point is
Would
that
be
you
the
have no
PR
other reason to
committee.
come out, that you do your work beforehand to educate people about why judges are important, and that judges are united in talking about this, not about Democrats or Republicans, but voting, and you start telling some of the stories that you told here tonight, not just about your own personal life, but about what you deal with. People have no idea what judges do. I mean, a lot of people may think, they're the ones that are in the Court of Appeals that, you never see, you never hear about, you see the name every 6 years, and that's not the case. And so I think there's an education program that needs to be done, and if it's not, you're going to see fall off. You had a fall off in the presidential. It's even worse in a non-presidential year.
Last year when I ran, I won with half as many votes as I got in '08. So in 2014, I won with half as many votes. That's because half as many votes at least were cast. My fall off was less last year because I was more well known, or they thought they'd heard of me or seen me someplace, I guess, before. By that time, people had voted for me or not voted for me 3 times. So they're like, oh, I know her, I'm going to vote for her.
I saw your picture on your billboard.
Whatever. So, but I think that I am very interested in seeing what would happen if we moved to a June, election or something that was only about judicial races. It would be very interesting, and I would like to hear about it because it can't be unique to Ohio.
No, it's not. Can we thank the judge for coming tonight?
What do I do?
Hope you enjoyed it. Not heavy lifting, right?
It was really, I like how thoughtful people are.
Thank you so much for coming to speak.
Oh, sure.
I'm actually attending law school.
Oh, you are? Okay, well, you know what? Let me give you my card, and anytime you want, come over to my court. I'm on the 3rd floor of the courthouse.
I actually am moving to Manager Mary.
Oh, awesome.
I'm
So,
so glad to take your card.
when are you going?
Look in to say thank you for coming.
Sure.
Very nice.
Tell me your name.
Chuck Netzel.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
It was very
Thank you.
interesting.
You can come over anytime and
Okay.
see what you think about it.